A Hermit in the Himalayas by Paul Brunton. Chapter 1. The Philosophy of Friendship. On ponyback in the Himalayas. My bungalow on a mountaintop. The last lap of my journey will soon be over. After weeks of fitful traveling since I left the torrid triangle patch of South India, tonight I shall take to my bed with a pleasant consciousness that it will probably be a long time before the roll of brown blankets and white sheets is strapped up in its canvas covering again. Not that the journey itself has not proved a welcome change. Even the gradual fall of the thermometer helps the sun-baked body, while the extensive panoramic succession of pictures and places stirs even the curiosity of the jaded intellect. There is a sense of freedom, a zest of relief for a weary European who arrives here after the suffocating plains where the summer heat lies like a shimmering pall. P-A-L-L. Best of all, one has had the pleasure of meeting old friends and making new ones. It is true that a man who bases his friendships on spiritual affinity rather than on the ties of self-interest or of worldly associations cannot hope to count many. For the dictates of the overself must be obeyed, and the different degrees of understanding themselves erect unscalable barriers between those whom God hath not joined together in the pleasure of friendship. When I reflect now over the variety of some of the external appearances beneath which I found this affinity during the present journey, I am astonished at the possibilities with which life presents us once we begin to walk in the shoes of the overself, however intermittently and however weakly. A bespectacled merchant in costly silks, whose shop fate has set in a crowded bazaar, a shrewdly intellectual assistant editor of a newspaper who talks politics and economics while I sip an iced drink, an illiterate workman who labors from dawn till night throughout the week for a meager wage and whose tragic poverty illustrates for me the truth that those who have perspired in the battle of life but never bled do not really know what it means. A middle-aged, noble-minded Maharaja who belongs to the Victorian epoch, in his earnest regard for moral restraints and in his melancholy observations upon the decadence which is fast overtaking today's younger generation. A young English headmaster who is trying with fresh eyes and fiery enthusiasm to lift educational methods out of the antiquated ruts in which he found them. A forceful and dominant minister whose abilities have made him the central figure in the government of a large Indian state, and whose fluent conversation provides me with an intellectual stimulus. A spiritual head of an Indian religious fraternity who benignantly ignores differences of belief in the deep regard that ties us to each other. A penniless and possessionless yogi who meditates on mysterious forces while he sits upon the Ganges bank beyond Rishikesh, that unique town where recluses, monks, and pilgrims make their permanent or temporary abode. With great calmness, he tells me how he separated the spirit from the body, and he found himself witnessing scenes in far-off Calcutta and even hearing the noise of London traffic as he looked down upon it. And then there is a young Bengali lady who has achieved an exceptional height of spiritual realization and whose face reminds one of the beatitude-filled face of Saint Teresa. And while she sits with half-closed eyes, surrounded by a large group of devotees, a lean, bent, old Mohammedan graybeard who takes me through dingy Delhi alleys and bazaars to the Juma Masjid, India's largest mosque. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Juma, Jumma, Masjid. Juma Masjid. India's largest mosque, where he discourses to me of his youthful adventures upon the Mecca pilgrimage, and then tells me how he is preparing himself for another kind of pilgrimage, to wit, his exit from the world. He is likable, this graybeard, for he does not hesitate to mix a little fun with his philosophy. There are several others, both known and unknown, who touch my trail so intimately they are perhaps more mundane in mind, but that does not prevent us from being completely at ease with one another. A man must be ready to touch life at many sides if he would really live, even as a great exemplar did not disdain to consort with the world's rejected and despised sinners, yet always he would do so where the inner attraction is mutual and spontaneous, not otherwise. Not seldom the most startling life changes come about this way. One of the first people whom Christ introduced to price life at its proper value, or in common parlance, whose soul he saved, was not a respectable prop of civic authority and civic virtue, but a harlot. When I was revisiting a certain city after some years of absence abroad, a friend there offered to give me a little party in my honor to enable me to meet the leading men of the town. I flatly refused. I had no desire to meet the leading men of any town. Besides, why all the bother? I had done a bit of journalism, a bit of editing, and a bit, I hope, of finer writing in a few books. I had made a few uncommon researches. That was all. Lots of men have done this, and more. Time to give a party when I shall have accomplished something worthwhile. Then, when I shall have climbed the Himalaya of the soul, reached its white summit, and if that ever happens, I fear the leading men of the town will not then want to meet me. There are still others whom I would have liked to meet again, but alas, time will not tarry. I dare not dally on my northward way, for I have a goal, an objective, one too, which is of the highest importance to me. And so now I'm sitting in the saddle astride a sturdy ash-gray mountain pony, listening to the chime of its jingling harness bells and moving at a walking pace up the steep, slippery trails that are leading me to the rarefied air of the Himalayan ridges. It would be untrue to say that both of us are not tired and will not welcome the final halt when it comes, nor that the string of coolie porters who are moving half a mile or so behind me in single file under the leadership of my servant, bearing baggage and provisions, will not be glad to take their agreed pay and last dismissal. Even the pony has developed an unfortunate and unpleasant habit of wandering stupidly to the extreme outside edge of the narrow trail, where a dangerous, sparsely timbered ravine of 3,000 feet depth awaits us like a yawning abyss. On the inner side of the path leads against the perpendicular face of the ridge out of which it is carved. It would be extremely easy for the animal to go down the fearfully abrupt slope infinitely faster than it came up, and finally measure its length upon the ground. The idea of sliding all the way down to the ravine bottom does not much appeal to me. The feeling remains and returns that I must check my steed firmly. I therefore pull frequently at the left rein, but the obstinate pony just as frequently makes for the precipice's edge, the whilst I sway in the saddle. I cannot see what attractive bait lures it towards utter destruction, but I have no intention of sharing its impending fate down that precipitous glen. Why it would want to forsake the subsolar existence at the prime of life, I really do not know. But this afternoon it deliberately tangled its right forehead into space over the precipice edge, with the result that it slipped and stumbled, sending me to the ground with a thud, a bruised hip, and painfully dislocated shoulder. I thought that the time had now arrived for the two of us to have a serious heart-to-heart talk, and I endeavored to point out to the melancholy creature the obvious error of its ways in skirting precipices so obstinately. Apparently, the conversation did some good, for it raised its sad but handsome head a little higher, and thereafter kept its feet on terra firma. It set its hooves down with greater care, and no longer did a mure's breadth separate us at times from the terrifying drop. I rewarded the pony later with a couple of spoonfuls of my precious sugar, once, alas, so common that it grew thickly in the plains around me, but now it has to be carefully conserved and thriftily ladled out, lest my supplies should run out before their estimated calendar month, and my tea therefore rendered totally unpalatable. The leader of the coolies has told me that the pony's undesirable habit has been inherited from a Tibetan pack pony parent, which used to carry huge loads in sacks swung so broadly across its back as to force it to keep away from the inner side of tracks, so that the load might clear the rocks on that side. The sun has shone directly down all day with a heat that surprises me, yet it is tolerable and not trying heat, something indeed like the temperature of a good August summer weather in Europe. In comparison with the terrific, enervating heat of the broiling plains, it is certainly paradisiacal. At a turn in the ever-winding cliff trail, which is climbing higher and higher, a whole new panorama of breathtaking scenic beauty is displayed before my wondering eyes. That nature could pile up cyclopean peaks and mountain ridges with such a generous hand and in such indiscriminate shapes is something which tame European eyes can scarcely believe. Look where one will. In every direction one is hemmed in by her Himalayan giants. To the northeast, a realm of perpetual frost, the colossal towering barrier that keeps Tibet, a suspicious and secluded alien in a world knit into friendly communication by every conceivable means, rears its creviced gray flanks, white snow-mantled shoulders, and bluish icy head to the sky from the shadowed ravines at its base. Enormous masses of smooth, shining snow glitter upon it. To the east, a long, irregular line of forest-covered heights and spurs stretches away, tier over tier, until it loses itself in the distant horizon. To the west, I look down into the great rugged gorges of grayish olive green blended with rich brown that meet and unite in a vast bowl of rock and earth thousands of feet below. To the south, I can but raise my head and crick my neck as I gaze at the uplifted summit of the lofty purple granite cliff which towers above my pony only a couple of feet away from the animal's side, which dominates the immediate landscape. All this plethora of camel-backed ridges, split by deep chasms, soaring peaks, and sharply cut ravines, lies strewn confusedly, with one branching out of the other, or running parallel with it for a length, and then twisting off at a tangent to meet it suddenly again. The map makers must have had a hard job here, methinks, amid the heap of endless confusion, harder than amongst the level farms and unfenced fields of the plains. The heights have been thrown up haphazard, just anyhow. There is nothing Euclidean here. Not a sign of a straight geometrical layout. It is strange to remember suddenly that all Himalaya whirls with this ballpark of ours around the sun at more than 18 miles per second. Yet the rugged charm of this display makes it more attractive than any other natural scene I know. Take nature's gift thankfully. The gods who have made this land must have been beauty drunk. The wild beauty of this scene outsteps imagination. It inspires the mind and uplifts the soul. Were I a Shelley, I would quickly become lyrical over this region, but alas, I am not. For the lordly Himalayas exist within an aura of complete solitude, which is ineffably peaceful and inspiringly grand. In these Himalayan highlands, there arises the true charm of mountaineering. Civilization is so remote, towns so distant, and serenity so prevalent. They carry the suggestion of eternity, although there are hill ranges in the south which geologically are far older. The tremendous heights are perhaps chiefly responsible for this suggestion. Here one is face to face with the universal mystery itself, hiding behind no man-made facade of gregariously built cities, but revealing its calm, challenging face directly and assuming its wildest form. Himalaya embodies the grand forces of nature. A Hermit in the Himalayas by Paul Brunton. We continue climbing the narrow track. The steep paths of the Himalaya are akin to the steep paths of life itself, but I adventure up the rugged trail with music sounding in my ears. God is luring me on. I am riding not merely into Himalaya, but into heaven. I have forsaken one world only in order to find it better. No hardship have come to me, none can come to me, for they would first have to penetrate into the region of my heart, and they cannot do that. The air is sweet with love that emanates from the Supreme Being. The mountains are flushed with beauty that belongs not to them, but to God. The entire journey has become a glorious poetic symbol. The quest of the Holy Grail is its divine reality. My pony's feet move unsteadily upon the flinty stones, crumbled rock, and dislodged granite fragments, which intermittently litter the way. Having fallen from the slopes above, fitful patches of grass occasionally survive the stony ground. Sometimes the track side proudly flaunts a few flowers even. Both mint and marigold are here. On the way I pass a curious sight. A coolie is carrying a lady in a queer conical wicker basket which is tied behind his back. The passenger's husband walks behind. Both are pilgrims to some holy Himalayan shrine. Although they have not taken the customary route, the lady is not infirm, but the labor of walking steep trails is too much for her. A mountain spring bubbles slowly across the track, out of a rocky cleft in the massive wall of forest-covered slope. It creates a shallow puddle and then drops over the side of the chasm. The pony suddenly stops, drops its head to the ground, and thirstily sucks the puddle. Had I not sensed what it was going to do, I might easily have tumbled out of the saddle again and down into that gaping ravine. But I take the precaution of dismounting in advance. From this point, the trail keeps fairly horizontal, and we move at a faster pace. Nevertheless, because of the winding nature of the country, we have to make considerable detours around the outside of peaks and the insides of valleys. No shortcuts are possible. Fir trees flourish hereabouts upon the mountainside and are held in the tight-coiled grasp of creepers which climb in spirals around their bark. Once I see a solitary rhododendron tree, ablaze with red blossoms, and again a few clustering stars of flower blooms. Eventually, the sun begins its fated decline. The heat rapidly diminishes. A lustrous yellow pallor sinks over the landscape as the sky turns to transparent amber. Occasionally, a gliding vulture and a circling eagle sweep through the turquoise blue sky to their eyries. I notice how the vulture does not fly jerkily like other birds, but with movements exactly like those of an aeroplane. It balances flat on its wings and glides evenly up or down. Once I hear the cuckoo. Its call makes me think of spring's sure recurrence in Europe. Sundown brings a rapid change of flowers. The peaks and crags of ethereal white which rise to the sky are now warmed by the waning beams into masses of coral and pink. But this is only temporary. The descent of the dying sun transforms the frosted silver of the snows from color to color, while suffusing the lower forest-covered ridges with saffron. The red drifts into gold, and the gold returns once again to yellow, and when the final rays take their leave, the warm colorings also abandon the range, and the snows assume a chalky whiteness. The pallor becomes more pronounced and ends in grayish white. Sunset, alas, is but a short interval, twixt a day and night in the east. But these colorful moments are most precious to me. Soon a shroud of vagueness envelops the whole countryside, but the moon rises early from behind the range, and fortunately it is a thick crescent, so that we can see our direction clearly enough under its beams as soon as our eyes become accustomed to the spreading darkness. Nevertheless, when our route takes us, after much twisting and turning along the top of the forest-clothed ridge, we find ourselves surrounded by blackness and can scarcely pick our way through the trees. At last we emerge into the silvery light once more, and then my pony has a 3-mile stretch of level, visible mountainside track before it. The chief practical advantage of such a track, I reflect dryly, is that you cannot possibly lose your way. No signposts are provided merely because no signposts are needed. You may go forward or turn back and retreat, but you cannot go anywhere else unless indeed you know how to scale perpendicular hills or how to descend abrupt precipices. This is far better than wandering through a strange city where nothing is easier than getting oneself lost. Yes, it is the last lap of the journey. We ride through a monstrous yet beautiful ghost world. Leaves turn to silver in the moonbeams, and tree trunks seem to be carved out of frosted stone. There is something indescribably weird in the picture of pale moonlight on the world's giants. I judge the time to be about 9 o'clock, but I cannot tell with exactness, for my wristlet watch has been smashed in the unlucky accident, and henceforth I must exist timeless until my return to civilization. Not that it will be any noticeable loss, I decide sardonically, for time and I can well part with each other for a few months. The earth must henceforth turn in its diurnal course unheeded. Moreover, it was better for me to have fallen a few feet than 3,000. Silhouetted against the black background of the sky, which is now rapidly filling with the first multitude of trembling stars which arrive with their jewels as ambassadors of the night, stands the rising terrace of peaks that crosses the far end of our route transversely and blocks the valley. It is like a line crowded with pyramids. Each is now a wraith-like titan, grand, grim, yet undeniably beautiful. Each mocks at this puny, pony-mounted creature that dares to invade its silent realm. For the Himalayas, in this weird light, has become the fated land of the giants. Here, those fairy stories which cheered our childhood may well come true. It is fitting that I should suddenly detect on the western horizon the beautiful star cluster of the Pleiades in the zodiacal constellation of Taurus. Not an ancient people exists, but has its legend of these 7 daughters of Atlas who were raised to the heavens and transformed into stars. I push on eagerly. It is fortunate that we have sufficient moonlight to guide us, because I see that the forest-hidden nature of the country might quite possibly cause me to miss my destination and override the pony unnecessarily. And this, I am ashamed to confess, does happen. We travel a quarter mile too far when an uneasy and growing sense of being wrong completely overwhelms me and forces me to dismount and turn the pony's head in the direction whence we have come. My electric torch lies thoughtlessly packed in the baggage. There is no help for it but to make a slow and careful exploration on foot. And after I've done this, I discover that the trail almost skirts the top of the ridge at one point, where a little clearing has been made in the dense forest and covers the mountainside from top to bottom. I tether the animal to a tree and clamber up the short, steep bank to the summit. There, gleaming palely in the moonlight, are the whitewashed walls of an ordinary bungalow set amid a wild yet Arcadian region upon the very crest of the mountains. I have reached my new home. A few paces beyond the building brings me to the edge of another deep gorge which abuts on the southern face of the ridge. It is clear that I shall have to walk warily hereabouts in the future. Once more I reward the pony, which, despite its legacies of painful injuries to my person, has carried me successfully to this unique and attractive domicile. On this occasion I plunge a hand more deeply into my pocket, and it eagerly gobbles up the liberal helping of sugar. A cold wind comes blowing off the snows, and I turn up my jacket collar. Overhead the sky scintillates with its wealth of beauty. Planets wander through the firmament with unnatural brilliancies. The stars in their high heaven are like clusters of diamonds upon the crowned hair of night. And now I sit down beside the path to wait patiently for the party of bearers whom I have outdistanced some hours previously. I fall into a reverie of the night until after time I am awakened by hallooing shouts and cries of welcome. Once again the gregarious sense reasserts itself, and I feel pleased that we are all together again. I count my train of coolies, add the servant, and note all are safe after their journey. Their jolly faces smile in accord with mine when I inform them lightly, we are 7, and add a few lines from a certain poem, but they miss the subtle Wordsworthian allusion. Perhaps they imagine I am chanting a prayer to my strange gods in thanksgiving for our arrival, but I do not know. The baggage is hauled up the bank and deposited inside the bungalow. Bags are opened, candles and matches are found, and the ceremony of paying off the bearers gone through. They are wiry, well-knit little men belonging to the hill tribes. They are remarkably strong and sturdy. Coolies drawn from their class can carry a 100-weight load on their backs day after day. Not that I have ever given them such an inhuman load, 50 pounds being their average. Yet their diet is often nothing more than rice and parched peas, and not much at that, with a little milk to wash it down. One wonders how much meat and how many meals a day a European porter would need to eat to support such work. My own coolies have their chief meal in the morning and only an extremely light one after. These tough tribesmen can stand more heat and cold, weight carrying and height climbing than their slimness suggests as possible. I forestall their demands for bakshish by giving them a sum which silences the garrulous leader. They will have but a short sleep, they tell me soon, and then be off before dawn, taking the pony with them. My servant opens the bedrolls, tired and dusty as we, unfamiliar with our location. We have no time to take further stock of our surroundings, but disregard all else and throw our bodies into that mysterious yet ever welcome condition which the world calls sleep.